everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Jen here with my co-host Carrie. And we are talking about a subject that I think is probably debated over and over again, especially in the nutrition world. So we sort of wanted to address organic and is it worth it? Kind of what you need to know, what should you buy organic? And does it really matter? And so we just want to take this time and, explain a little bit. A lot of my time was spent understanding organic farming since I worked for a company that did organic whole food supplements, and they really have been, farming organic for 100 years. So it was really good knowledge that I got to, that I acquired about, just how important organic is, but also too, it's not a magic bullet. It's not a magic fix. And, pretty much, a lot of people are like, it's not organic, I'm not going to eat it. When, whole foods are our main focus, right? Yes. Do we want to focus on something called the dirty dozen, eating those organic? So, absolutely. The dirty dozen are the most, top 12 foods that are sprayed. So, Carrie, just want to just talk about what organic really means and maybe what it doesn't mean.
Yeah. Um, so the term organic just really means that they take certain steps in their processes to not obviously not spray as many chemicals. That's what we usually think about when we think about organic. It doesn't have, well, sometimes we think it doesn't have any chemicals, but it does have some. There's a small list that are approved things to spray on organic crops, but it doesn't have any glyphosate, which is heavily sprayed typically on non-organic produce and then some grains that we'll talk about that in just a minute. But the term organic just means that they take different steps whenever they're thinking about growing whatever they're growing versus using genetically modified seeds and different things like that. So definitely it means that more time and attention has been taken in the growing process, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee nutritional density per se. Um, like a apple that's organic and an apple that's not organic doesn't necessarily mean that one's more nutritionally dense. It literally just means that one hasn't been sprayed with different chemicals and that there might have been some other things in the growing process that were different, maybe the soil, things like that. And so you might have a better way of explaining that because you did so much research on that, Jen.
Yeah, not research. I mean, I just, being I was around an organic farm, and Christine, who ran the farm, was just extremely knowledgeable. And just to sort of back up, right? So organic means there's no synthetic pesticides, herbicides, bactericides. Sometimes they use things for rodents, they'll spray for that. So they're not spraying. They organic also means they can't use a genetically modified seed, so it's not genetically modified, which is super important for a lot of people in other ways. Genetically modified is not great for lots of reasons, but basically, especially if you have an immune compromise, because those genetic modifications can create havoc with the immune system. That's really important. But as Carrie mentioned, that doesn't necessarily mean they're nutrient dense. Are they more nutrient dense in the sense that, yes, they haven't soaked up these toxic chemicals? Absolutely. But there's something called crop rotation, which is super important. So, again, my reference is Standard Process because I spent so much time with them. And I just think that, she is brilliant because she has to keep up with demand, right? And they're literally growing everything, or 80% of the things that are going into a product. And sometimes they would up her beet yield, 3 times in a growing season. And they're in Wisconsin. So it's not like they're in Florida or California where they have, a really expanded growing time. But anyway,
Yeah.
they were really good about rotating crops. So they use something called cover crops. And that is, a cover crop is to literally add nutrients back into the soil that maybe the previous crop had, sucked out or depleted. They also would not put the same crop on the same land. I believe it was for 8 harvests. So they wouldn't put it back because they didn't want to deplete that soil. They literally will build up and rotate the crops continuously to make sure of the nutrient density. So again, just wanted to kind of stress those couple things that, organic does matter in the sense that, and let me just preface by saying a lot of the people I see in person and really even some of our virtual glyphosate is definitely something that shows up with gut issues. I mean, it is pervasive. And that's because they douse wheat crops with the Roundup. So they'll spray it ongoing. Of course, it's GMO, so it's resistant. And then literally right before they harvest wheat. Now remember, most of your packaged foods have some sort of wheat, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of people are getting them as the processed packaged foods. So right before they harvest it, they douse it in the Roundup to dry it out right before harvest. So you're getting excessive levels in especially wheat. And then corn and soy, which is in most everything that's packaged, if you look at it, is GMO. So it's been genetically modified. So those are just a couple things to really keep an eye out if you're paying attention to toxic load, in your everyday diet.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think sometimes we only think of organic or non-organic when it comes to produce. But there are packaged, obviously, things that, as Jen just mentioned, have wheat that's heavily sprayed with glyphosate as well. And so it does matter when you think about packaged things as well, and grains especially, because they are oftentimes sprayed with things like Roundup. That, yeah, it's just, typically, I just want you to think about how it's not just one thing, right? Like, we're talking about organic here today, and you might have only been thinking about produce, but it's definitely wider than that. And then you also have to think about other ways that you might be, getting exposed to different toxins with personal care or with cleaning products and things like that. So sometimes it's easy to just, like, I don't know, get down on yourself because maybe you can't buy everything organic, or maybe you get hyper focused on, only buying organic this or that. But just think about it in more of a bigger term, the bigger lens, I guess I should say, because it really is the cumulative toxic load that we have to be more so, cognizant of. And
Yeah.
so I also think it definitely is good to keep in mind that a whole food is pretty much always going to be better than a packaged food. So if you had the choice of and non-organic apple and like organic crackers, I mean, you're going to get more out of the apple than you are out of the crackers. So I think it's just good to keep that in mind when we're thinking about just big picture and like nutritional density. Um, so I think sometimes we can get all in our head about these things.
Yeah. And also I wanted to mention, for me, we have a local farm here, Rainbow Farms. They're amazing that aren't certified organic, right? But they really do focus on regenerative farming, and it's a local grower. I can talk to the growers. I can discuss what they use and what they don't use. So, and while they're not certified organic, because certification organic is really pricey, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard for the farmers to do. So maybe look for a local farmer that quote unquote might not be certified, but is really interested in, growing things the best way possible that are really affordable and easy accessible too. Where we live, it's hard to get that stuff in the winter. So, but
Yeah.
in the warmer months, um, and right, you're eating local, which in my opinion, usually where you are matters as far as getting food not transported several hundred miles.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a big difference. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Um, so I just wanted to go back to something you said and referenced was the Dirty Dozen, and I wanted to just list off what was in the 2024 list of the Dirty Dozen. They haven't come out with a 2025 one yet. Um, but this is a list that basically means these are the most heavily sprayed um, produce. And so you would want to buy those organic if you could. If you had to prioritize something, you would want to prioritize these. That's what it means by Dirty Dozen. They're the most heavily sprayed. So that would be strawberries, spinach, kale, which would include also collard greens and mustard greens, grapes, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, peppers, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. So a lot of those you'll notice, you're not having, well, apples you might would peel, but you would want to eat you wouldn't want to peel those, but you could. But most of those you wouldn't peel. So just think about that. If you're eating the skin, then that would be an even more reason to buy organic. And some of these things, if you can't find organic versions fresh, you could get them frozen, like green beans. I buy a lot of times frozen. I can get those organic. And by the way, I live in a very small town that we don't have like a lot of organic stuff, but thank goodness, like little smaller stores are starting to get more organic things because people want them. So that's definitely a plus, and I've seen that for sure. But again, I want to prioritize these for sure, but I also know my kids really love fruit, and if they don't have organic strawberries that day, I'm probably going to get regular and just try to wash them more. That is another thing. You would want to wash any type of produce that you get, whether it's organic or not. Um, and so you can do that. You can buy fruit and veggie washes, but you could just put them in water and sprinkle a little baking soda in the water. I also sometimes put essential oils like lemon. So that would definitely be something that you could do right when you got home. I usually just try to throw everything in a bath of that mixture and let it sit for 5 minutes or so, and then wash it.
Yeah, and I just want to go over, so there's a clean list too.
Yeah.
So things that normally aren't sprayed a lot and you can tend to eat conventional. And those are avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, onions, papaya, sweet peas, usually frozen are best. They're usually a little bit cleaner. Asparagus, honeydew melon, kiwi, cabbage, mushrooms, and mangoes. So those are your clean ones that tend to be a little bit better as far as pesticide residue, having not as much.
Yeah. So if you see that list, that's what that means. Sometimes I remember posting it a few years ago and people were really confused about the names. So
Yeah.
if you're
Yes.
not familiar with that, hopefully that made sense the way we explained it. We haven't talked a lot about animal products and pantries. We talked a little bit about processed foods. Do you want to talk about organic when it comes to those?
Organic processed foods.
Or animal products and pantry staples.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, what I would say is, as far as pantry staples, oils, grains, packaged snacks, I remember reading about the Bonanza. Everybody thought Bonanza pasta was better for you. It
Mhm.
was chickpea pasta, but it was loaded with Roundup. So opt for organic when you can, for sure. Um, Also, I'll look for things like oils. I'll look for things sometimes out of Italy or Spain because they tend to just not use as much pesticides or processing. Um, I remember being in Italy and David wanted, Nutrigrain bars, and I was like, no, you can't have those. And I was like, wait, we're in Italy. I was like, let me look at the label. And sure enough, there was no dyes. It was a completely different food list, and it was the same brand. And of course, they were
Wow.
okay. So, again, if you're buying packaged foods, I would still oats, those can be heavily sprayed. So make sure, anything with those packaged oats or grains, or even the oils, as I mentioned, a lot of the corn and soy oils are GMO. So look for those. And then animal products. So organic and pasture raised meat, dairy, and eggs, obviously to reduce your exposure to hormones, pesticides. And if you are eating conventional, most of those toxins are stored in the fatty part, so in the fat. So don't eat the fat if you're eating conventional. Obviously, I know my kids love the fat on the steak. But if it's a conventional steak, you might want to stay away from that.
Yeah.
Just because that's kind of where they build up. And then, as I mentioned before, there are uh I was going to say personal care stuff too. There's local people that will produce, like I had a beautiful tallow based personal care products like chapsticks and lotions and face soap, that you can find. So, they're usually at farmers markets or local co-ops. Seek those people out because that can be a great source for personal care, personal and even cleaning products too.
Yeah, that's true. And I was going to say that obviously we're talking about shopping local, but to get some of the other things that you can't get like at a local farm, um, Aldi is a really good place that has a lot of organic options that I really like to shop at. Costco, I know, has a lot as well. If you're thinking about, money and just trying to stretch, a dollar, you definitely want to think about how you can maybe buy some of these things in bulk, or just get them at a lower price. So shop
Yeah, and
around. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And remember, you don't need to buy everything organic. Use the dirty dozen list, if you have to. It doesn't have to be perfect. Um, you know, yeah, don't sometimes I think we get stuck in if it's not
Yeah.
organic, I'm not eating it. If it's processed, I'm not eating it. Sometimes keeping your blood sugar stable is more important at that moment.
100%.
Yeah,
And if everything's running smoothly, your body is equipped to process these things and get them out.
right.
I think sometimes it's whenever, we are backed up and our blood sugar's not regulated and all these things maybe aren't working great, then that's when we can feel the effects more of chemicals. So we're going to come in contact with chemicals, and nobody is perfect in this area. But we just wanted to give you some things to think about when you try to think about your overall toxic load and how you might could decrease that a little bit, and just do what you can. Don't
Sure.
stress. Don't stress
Yeah,
about the rest. So we hope
for
this
sure.
has been helpful to you. Let us know if you have any questions or anything that we can help you with in this area. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.